G'day, I'm Brett, I'm a freelance videographer, and this is a little recording I'm doing on the GoPro Hero 10 just to demonstrate what I think are probably the best settings for this particular situation, which is filming inside of a moving vehicle. So I'm just going to cut back to the Hero 10 camera body right now, and we'll go through what those settings are, and then we'll come back to this situation and I'll show you why some of those settings are actually really important. So let's check that out now. Alright, so this is just a quick overview of my custom settings for when I'm shooting in a car. I've used the motor labeled preset just because, you know, it's easy to remember, motor vehicle. So let's go into that now, have a quick look. And you can see I've got a few other presets there as well, but this one is the one that we're talking about. So let's go into edit. And then let's look at the settings. So resolution frames per second, we've got 5.3K 25. Lens, we've got wide, HyperSmooth off, schedule capture off, duration limit off, hindsight off. So we'll go into more details about why I've got these settings as they are in the driving test, but probably the main thing to talk about right now is the 5.3K and 25. It's just a big feature of the Hero 10 is that it can shoot 5.3K, and basically rule of thumb with GoPros, I reckon, is shoot the maximum resolution possible to get the best quality possible. I've compared 5.3K to the 4K and to the other resolutions that are in there, and I just think 5.3K looks the best. Timer off, zoom 1.0, you don't want to have any like zooming in the shot. Okay, ProTune settings. Bitrate, I think it's a good idea to set it to high. However, it's not always visible, the difference between high and standard. So if you are a bit, short for space and you don't want giant files, then maybe go standard. However, I have noticed some visual difference dealing with things like gradients and things like that, where compression can, cause some visual artifacts. So pretty hard to spot for the most part, but I think to err on the side of caution, it's good to shoot in high bitrate. Shutter auto works pretty well. EV comp -0.5 is recommended by GoPro to help try and preserve the highlights a little bit. White balance, I think auto gives you better performance. ISO minimum 100 is the lowest that you can go. ISO max, I like to go with 400 because for the most part I'm shooting in daylight conditions, and you're not really going to be going over 400 in daylight anyway. However, it's worth just putting a cap on the ISO because this camera can get pretty noisy in darker areas. So I think ISO max of 400 is a good way to go. Sharpness I have set to low, color I have set to flat, and I'll go more into those two in the test as well. And raw audio I have off. I've tested the raw audio. I don't really think it's worth using, to be completely honest. Wind I've got set to off, which I'll also go into further in the test as well. And then with the shortcuts, I just have lower left lens, lower right HyperSmooth, and the other two off. I actually like to have less shortcuts on the screen just to, keep it a bit cleaner and keep it simple. The only other thing that it's worth double checking is that voice command is on. Voice command is an awesome feature with the Hero 10, and it's quite handy when you're driving around, being able to tell the camera to start and stop recording as required. And also that your front screen is set to showing the actual image, not just like part of it or display only, because that's quite useful, particularly when you've got the camera facing back towards you and you're framing up as an extra little thing in addition to using your app. And that's it. Thanks for watching that. Now we are currently using those settings that I've just described, but I'm going to change one setting at a time just to kind of see what the differences are like. So the first thing we'll look at is the lens. Now I've chosen the wide lens because you basically just capture everything in the frame and the distortion is only really at the edges. And when I looked at this as a possibility of using a linear lens instead, I found that it just pulled the distortion in closer and created a bit of a warping effect on the driver's head, which I didn't think looked all that great. So I'll just demonstrate that right now just so you can see what I'm talking about. So now we are on the linear lens or field of view, and you can see what that looks like by comparison to the wide lens. Now personally, I thought that this just created a little bit too much of a warping on the head, and it wasn't really that good a look. So yeah, that's it. That's the linear view. So we'll go back to the wide view now. And the other thing as well is, if you're not getting that distortion on people a little bit further into the frame by shooting wide, if you want to bring it in closer, it's a 5.3K like resolution image, you're not hardly likely to be editing in 5.3K, so you can just crop it a bit in post and zoom in a little, and that's a much better way to go about it. So that's my reasoning for that particular field of view. Alright, we are back on my settings now and back to wide lens. Next thing I want to demonstrate is HyperSmooth, and why I think it's a good idea to have HyperSmooth switched off when we are driving around in a car. Alright, so I've just turned on HyperSmooth, and the main difference I noticed when HyperSmooth was switched on was that the image just seems to be kind of drifting and floating, and to me that just didn't really look very good. Like, I would rather have a steady image with the natural bumps of the road that occur as you're driving along than this weird kind of almost handheldy kind of look to the driving shot. So that is why I prefer to have stabilization off. And the other thing about that is that the stabilization is essentially too strong. You've either got off, high, or boost. And so if there was a more mild version of stabilization, that might be acceptable, but otherwise you could just stabilize it where you want, to what setting that you want in post-production instead. So that'd be my preference to using HyperSmooth in a moving vehicle. Let's go back now to my settings, and we'll check out the next feature. Alright, we're back on my settings, and this time we're going to have a look at color. The 3 different color settings in the Gopro Hero 10 are flat, natural, and vibrant. And basically each of them just get, natural and vibrant just get more saturated, more contrasty as they go. I prefer to shoot flat and then color grade it afterwards. All of this footage so far has been shot flat with a color grade applied. So what I'm going to do now is get rid of that color grade, so that should be gone now. And then we're going to do a comparison from that to natural and vibrant and see how they look. Alright, so I have just switched to the natural color profile, and then we can see what this looks like. So look, natural is not bad, and I think for really quick turnaround stuff it's probably a good option to go with, but for me personally I just felt like it is a little bit too saturated, too contrasty for my liking. I'd rather just add that saturation and contrast in myself later. Alright, so just for comparison, this is the vibrant color profile, and it's probably a profile that I would pretty much never use just because it's too saturated and too contrasty for my liking. Alright, so we're back on my settings and back to flat color, and the color grade has been reapplied. The next thing that I want to talk about, there's only 2 more things to talk about. The next thing I want to talk about is sharpness, and why I've got my sharpness set to low. The reason why I've got it set to low is just because it looks better. What the camera is doing with its sharpness settings is actually just adding more detail into the image. So it's detecting lines and it's enhancing them. Traditionally, I don't actually think that looks very good, but just to compare, we'll show you. So GoPro, stop recording. Alright, so I've just set the sharpness to medium, and this is what medium sharpness looks like. See if you like it better than low sharpness. And now this is high sharpness, and you should see that it has added a fair amount of detail there. And honestly, I can't imagine where I would ever use this setting. So there you have it, that's high sharpness, and now I'm going to flick back to my normal settings. And we are back to my normal settings again, and you can see why I think it looks better to just shoot low sharpness, and that kind of ties into the whole 5.3K thing as well, because basically low sharpness, high resolution, you should still get a reasonably good image to work with. one last thing to talk about when recording in a car, and that is audio. Now there is a noticeable difference when you have the wind filter on or off or on auto in a car. So there are situations when you use the audio from a GoPro camera, mounted on the windscreen like that, because it's actually a pretty good position for a microphone. And yeah, every now and then you can get away with it. I'm using it right now. So what I have for my wind setting is off, and I think that gives you the clearest possible audio. But again, because we love to compare stuff, let's have a listen to it with the wind on. So GoPro, stop recording. Alright, so now I have switched the wind filter on, and the audio should sound just a little bit different. So let's just see how that sounds with the wind filter on. So what I found in testing was I thought it was a wee bit more muffled and just not quite as clear and crisp as the wind filter off. Now the next thing we're going to look at is auto. Alright, so this is the wind filter set to auto, and I just didn't really like the sound of auto quite as much. I felt like it just jumped around a little bit more in terms of consistency and quality, and so that's why I thought that it sounded better having wind filter off when you're in a car and there's no wind. Alright, so we're back now to the wind filter off. And that's everything. That just wraps things up for this little demo of different settings and why I think these ones work pretty well. So yep, I hope that was helpful for you, and happy shooting, I guess. GoPro, stop recording.